Have you ever seen a wall or a fence with a sign written on it, "Do not enter, no trespassing, danger," and you wanted to go in there so badly and see what's inside? Well, there are a lot of people see these signs and just say, "Screw it, we're going in." Hello everyone, my name is Leo, and today I'll be telling 3 stories of people ignoring all the signs, warnings, and even cops, and not giving a damn about anything or anyone, and deciding to just get in where they shouldn't, and they instantly regret it. Danieldukes always seemed to struggle with respecting boundaries. Back in 1996, when he was 24 years old, he became completely fixated on a video game series called Ultima. It was a huge sensation in the early days of PC gaming, a captivating fantasy game where players could roam freely in an open world. Daniel somehow discovered the home of the game's creator, and one night in the spring of that year, he went to the creator's house. Daniel knocked on the door, hoping for a response, but when the creator didn't answer, he grew frustrated and left. However, his obsession drove him to return a couple of hours later. This time, he decided to break a window to get inside the house. Quietly, he made his way upstairs and into one of the bedrooms. Feeling tired, he crawled into one of the beds and fell asleep, oblivious to the invasion of privacy he had committed. The next morning, when the creator woke up, he found Daniel lying in one of his beds. He started shouting at him to leave his house, but Daniel seemed completely unbothered. Frustrated, the creator called the police, who arrived and found Daniel still in bed. They had to pull him out of the bed to arrest him. A year later, Daniel found himself in trouble again, this time in Orlando, Florida at SeaWorld. After the park had closed, he snuck into the manatee exhibit and started swimming with the manatees. It seemed like he wanted to play with them. Despite his previous run-ins with the law, Daniel was far from being a hardened criminal. Daniel ended up committing a series of small crimes as he traveled through South Carolina, Washington, Texas, and finally arrived in Florida. One of his offenses in Florida was stealing a candy bar from a 7-Eleven store. He was ultimately sent to jail for 3 days. Once he was released from the Florida jail, Daniel decided to go back to Orlando, Florida. He wanted to visit SeaWorld again, specifically the manatee exhibit where he had previously jumped into the water. He planned to check out the manatees along with other animals that caught his interest. When he arrived at the park, he headed towards the killer whale show. Trainers were scheduled to swim in a confined area with these enormous killer whales. Witnesses recalled seeing Daniel in the audience, captivated and amazed by the spectacle. His mouth hung open as he watched with great fascination. However, the most significant reaction from Daniel came when the trainers introduced tilikum, the largest killer whale ever captured, measuring more than 22 feet long and weighing over 12,000 pounds. Daniel became completely engrossed with tilikum. That night, after the park closed and everyone left, Daniel returned, dressed in a bathing suit. He managed to climb over the fence and secretly re-entered SeaWorld, just as he had done a few years earlier when he snuck into the manatee exhibit. Remarkably, he evaded the surveillance cameras as he roamed through the park. With only his bathing suit on, Daniel made his way to the killer whale enclosure. He hopped over the fence, removed his shirt and shoes, and leaped into the enormous pool, joining tilikum. When Daniel leaped into the manatee exhibit, he claimed he simply wanted to have fun with the gentle creatures. It is believed that when he jumped in with tilikum, his intention was also to play around and have fun with him. Surprisingly, tilikum seemed quite enthusiastic about playing with Daniel. The large whale swiftly grabbed hold of Daniel's shorts, pulling him down to the bottom of the pool and dragging him along. Tragically, Daniel drowned in the process. Once Daniel had passed away, tilikum became extremely aggressive. He started violently tossing him around, tearing off parts of his body. Eventually, tilikum positioned Daniel's lifeless body on his own back, where he kept it. The following day, when the staff arrived and made the heartbreaking discovery, they faced difficulty in separating Daniel's body from tilikum. The whale seemed determined to hold on to his toy. Consequently, the team had to use a special medical device to lift tilikum and retrieve Daniel's body. Daniel's death was deemed an accident, caused by his own unwise choices. Therefore, tilikum did not face any punishment for the incident. As World War II was nearing its end in early 1945, the British had their eyes on Ramreeisland, a strategic prize that the Japanese had snatched from them 3 years earlier. Ramree was a large and flat island off the coast of Burma, ideal for launching air raids on the mainland. The British wanted to reclaim their former airbase once and for all and use it to their advantage. But the Japanese were not going to give it up easily. It was January 21st, 1945. The British and Indian forces were ready to launch their assault on Ramreeisland. They had a fleet of ships that provided them with naval artillery support, firing massive shells at the Japanese airbase and other targets on the island. The Japanese were outnumbered and outgunned, but they fought fiercely and stubbornly. They knew they could not hold the airbase for long, but they also knew they could not surrender. They decided to retreat to the opposite end of the island, where they expected to find a larger battalion of Japanese soldiers that could help them resist the British invasion. They hoped to regroup and make a stand there, but they did not know what horrors awaited them on their way. To get to the other side of the island, they had to traverse 10 miles of mangrove swamp, a nightmare of a terrain that was full of deadly creatures and hazards. There were poisonous spiders and insects. There was mud that was so deep and sticky that it could trap them and make them easy targets for the enemy. There was no clear path or direction, only a maze of roots and branches that blocked their view. But they were determined to make it through, and they entered the swamp with courage and resolve. What they did not know was that Ramreeisland had a secret that made all the other dangers seem trivial. A creature that was lurking in the swamp waiting for its prey, and they were walking right into its den. The British troops did not want to follow the Japanese into the swamp. They knew it was too dangerous and risky. Instead, they set up boats around the swamp, blocking any possible exit for the Japanese. The only way the Japanese could escape was to reach the other end of the island, 10 miles away, where their comrades were waiting for them. But that night, as the British were sitting in their boats, looking at the swamp, they heard a horrifying sound. It was the sound of the Japanese soldiers screaming in terror and pain. Then they heard gunshots and then silence. And then it would happen again. All over the swamp, screams, gunshots, silence. The British were puzzled and shocked. They wondered if they had any allies in the swamp. They wondered what was happening in there. The reason for the screams and gunshots was something that the Guinness Book of World Records has recorded as the biggest slaughter of humans by animals. And those animals were not just any animals. They were saltwater crocodiles. These huge predators can weigh up to 2,200 pounds and grow to be 23 feet long. They have a taste for human flesh, and National Geographic has ranked them as the most likely animals to kill a human. Ramreeisland was infested with these crocodiles, and they all lived in the swamp that the Japanese had entered. Many of the Japanese soldiers were wounded from the battle, and their blood was attracting hundreds of crocodiles to their location. Saltwater crocodiles are excellent hunters in the dark, so they probably waited until nightfall before they attacked the Japanese. The Japanese were trapped in the swamp, and the crocodiles were everywhere. They were snarling and snapping, devouring one person after another. Some of the Japanese soldiers tried to escape from the swamp, but they ran into the British. The British captured about 20 of them, and they told them what they had seen. They said they were surrounded by crocodiles that were huge and hungry. They said they had no chance of survival. Daylennpua had a dream. He wanted to climb the Haiku Stairs on the island of Oahu. He didn't care that it was illegal or dangerous. He was an adventurous 18-year-old native Hawaiian, and he wanted to see the world from the top of the mountain. He had a chance to fulfill his dream on February 27, 2015, when he was visiting his grandmother in Oahu. Daylen didn't spend much time with his grandmother, and since he was here, he figured he would do the one thing he had always wanted to do, which was to climb the island's very famous Haiku Stairs, or better known as the Stairway to Heaven. The staircase that ascended the side of a Hawaiian mountain comprised of narrow, rusty steps, poorly maintained over the years, totaling 4,000 in number. Originating from the World War II era, the United States Navy had constructed these stairs to gain access to the mountain summit, where a secretive radio station stood. Surprisingly, rather than demolishing the structure once the war ended, it was open to the public, allowing them to explore and appreciate the panoramic views. However, the stairs were too dangerous and poorly maintained, so they closed it to the public in 1987. They put up a fence and stationed guards to prevent people from going in. However, Daylen was determined to proceed with his plan. So that morning, he tells his grandma that he's thinking about jumping over the fence and going on the hike. His grandmother strongly advises against it. highlighting the inherent dangers involved and the hefty fines that could be imposed if caught. Initially, Daylin appears to back down. He tries to play it off as if he has changed his mind about the hike, assuring his grandmother that he won't go. However, right after breakfast, he quietly slips out of the house, boards a bus, and heads towards the base of the stairs, sticking to his original decision. Even though it was totally illegal, dangerous, and he was incriminating himself, he was so excited about going on this hike that he documented the whole trip by posting pictures of it to his social media. He posted pictures of himself at the start of the hike, of the rusty and narrow steps that zigzagged up the steep slope, and of the lush green forest that surrounded him. When you get to the summit, you're going to take as many photos as you can and post them all on your social media because that's the whole point of this hike. To go all the way up and enjoy the amazing, breathtaking views and take a whole lot of pictures to brag about it to your friends. But for whatever reason, around 11 a.m. that morning, Daylin's posting stops abruptly, which means he hasn't reached the summit yet. He didn't post anything for the rest of the day. He didn't come home that night. His family was worried sick. They contacted the police and reported him missing. A massive search operation was launched, involving helicopters, Navy personnel, and volunteers. They scoured the mountain for any trace of Daylin, but they found nothing. He had vanished without a trace. When they couldn't find him after several days, they had to call the search off, and everyone assumed that Daylin had probably slipped and fell down the mountain. After all, it is a very dangerous place and it's off limits for a good reason. And Daylin decided to ignore all of the warning and the signs and just go on this hike. The only clues they had of what might have happened to Daylin were his last photos on social media. But when people reviewed some of these pictures, they noticed something in a particular one. This shot looks like he's just taking a photo of the dense forest around the stairs. But if you look more closely, there is a man very clearly crouched down a little ways down the trail that appears to be hiding. And many people believe that that guy was following Daylin and at some point attacked him, and that Daylin didn't fall off the mountain. He was abducted or killed. Or maybe when he took this picture, he noticed the guy and was startled by him and he fell. Who was this man? Was he following Daylin? Did he attack him or abduct him? Did he actually have anything to do with his disappearance? These questions remain unanswered to this day. Daylin's fate is still a mystery, and so is the identity of the man in the bushes. So that's it for today's video. If you enjoyed it and you want more content like this, make sure to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel. With that being said, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.